Hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, NYKia 31 here. Gonna be talking Madden 21 dev deep dive with good old Clint Oldenburg. Clint Oldenburg and Kralo handling the stream. And I was really looking forward to this. I was looking forward to this with great anticipation, as I'm sure a lot of people were. And truthfully, they needed to deliver on this because the last couple of weeks out of the gate have not been great. EA, they should have done this stream a week ago at the latest. 2 weeks ago. They should have led with this. But if you haven't been paying attention the past couple of years, EA is obsessed with marketing to the casual first. They're obsessed with the casual audience. And that's not a Clint decision. It's not a Kralo decision, an A-Dub decision. Swami, that's a corporate decision. So I don't hold the devs' feet to the fire for stuff like that. They can't control that. EA is going to decide to roll out what they want to market when they want to market it. Simple as that. But it's just puzzling. It really is. So anyway, they bust out the gameplay deep dive. I have the link to the written blog as well in the description below. And there's quite a bit to unpack here. So let's get to it. We start out with run defense, and I think throughout the whole tone of the deep dive, I think Clint did a very good job of being in tune with a lot of the gameplay concerns that we had with Madden 20 that weren't addressed throughout the year. We hardly got any gameplay tuning or patches during the year. What we got were more abilities, on top of abilities, on top of more abilities, which didn't really do anything to correct core problems. I was really pleased to see in general a lot of focus on a lot of things that not just people like myself in the sim realm have been harping on. Also, the comp guys have been harping on this as well throughout the year and years. And, other people have been. I'm not the only one who've been banging the drum on a lot of these things. First of all, does everything sound like the most ideal solution, in my opinion? Not everything. But I do think that from the sound of things, an effort has been made to do a much better job of balancing the game than has been done in the past couple of years, which is really important. Things have to have a counter, and when you add something new, there has to be something to balance it on the other side, whether it be offense or defense. When you correct something, it has to be done with an eye towards not throwing the game out of balance. So on that note, let's get to it. As far as run defense is concerned, a lot of focus was put on force offenders, alignment, leverage, pursuit. Y'all have heard me scream about forced offenders for years now. You can't play an under or over front in this game. Why? Because that overhang outside linebacker, he's pinched in too tight, and on top of that, he plays with horrible technique. He always gets folded and hooked inside and gets up the edge. If you drop a safety in the box from that alignment, same deal with him. You're almost better off playing not almost, you are better off playing run defense with guys further out in space in wide 9 alignments in this game. The more that they're packed in, the worse they play as far as being able to hold leverage and pursue. In a 3-4, same way. Those outside backers, they pinch in tight, they don't hold leverage, and you can just scoot right around them running stretch. There's no such thing as spill and kill in Madden run defense, where you want to, worst case scenario, if you're pursuing inside out, if you can't shoot the gap or if you can't get the ball carrier when you're playing your gap, you want to kind of feather him and force him to the next gap defender. You want to force him to string the ball out wide to your pursuit. You get a running back running parallel to the line of scrimmage, you've won. You pursue inside out, and hopefully your guys are playing with good gap discipline to be conscious of cutback. Now, I hope all of this stuff is one, ratings driven. If you have bad personnel that is bad at pursuit and play recognition and are bad at block shedding, holding the ground, tackling, that should reflect itself. I don't want a case where this is just something that kills the run game altogether or greatly, waters it down to the fact that it makes running restrictive. You want to be able to run the ball against unsound alignments and weak box counts. But again, just balance it out because all that I described to you, keeping the running back tethered out going wide and keeping him parallel, that actually works against you in Madden 20. When you got things like human joystick and jukebox and all that stuff coming into play, which I'll get to when we talk about abilities. And point number two on this has to be consistent logic across all formations, 4-3 normal, under front, over front, your 3-4 sets, your nickel and dime sub packages. We got to get away from this game meta stuff where, for example, this year it's a 3-4 game. This year it's a 4-3 or 4-6 game. This year it's a big nickel over G game. That kind of stuff has to go away. We have to have this type of consistent logic across the board for a variety, for all the formations in the game, so that you have that gameplay balance and you have that diverse gameplay. So you're not going up against the same thing game after game after game. Because there's only a limited amount of sets that work. It's really hard to play a 4-3 defense in this game. That kind of stuff has to vanish. Again, balance. Balance is everything in these type of things. One of the bullet points in the run defense section of the blog says that edge and force defenders will have wider gap integrity versus heavy and wing tight end sets. That's another thing. Sound alignments. Can't play defense if you're not aligned properly in relation to the sets that you're facing. And what else does it say here? Force defenders will have wider formation alignments in many base defensive formations, and such as 3-4 and more plays within those base formations will have the force player aligned on the line of scrimmage instead of off the ball. So again, that issue that force defenders were packed in there too tight and not maintaining leverage after the snap of the ball. Defenders will have better anticipation of the ball carrier's movement by taking smarter angles while after shedding blocks. All that is stuff that we've desperately needed. And again, ultimately it's going to come down to how all this looks when it's all in motion. That'll decide the day, of course. But this is really a key thing that needed to address, along with tackling. There's so many leaky yardage. There's so much leaky yardage in the tackling because the tackling tends to put people into auto animations where they fall forward and they are lumped into bodies and they gain extra yardage. The tackling improvement section says defenders will now be much more aware when they are engaged in blocks near a ball carrier, and they'll trigger tackle attempts from those engaged blocks inside the trenches and in the open field versus impact blocks. Hit sticks and dive tackles have been tuned to make them more accessible and functional, all of which will come together with our new breakdown tackles for a more intuitive defensive experience. In addition to the upgrades to our run fit systems, we know how important tackling is to run defense as well. No kidding. We didn't just add the new breakdown and pylon tackles, we also made some core improvements to existing tackling systems to make tackling more accessible and stronger part of countering the run game. And they go into the location-based tackles. Now, from the footage that we've seen, the tackling does look cleaner animation-wise, and you don't see, or we haven't seen in those clips, a whole lot of leaky yardage. Now again, ball carriers that have the ability to do that, the Lamar Jacksons, the Christian McCaffreys, the Saquon Barkleys, the Le'Veon Bells in the world, they should be a handful to handle. But, in Madden the past couple of years, virtually all of these ball carriers, they get those cheap yardage animations because the tackling just isn't impactful, it isn't solid. I mean, you guys know the type of animations I'm talking about, where you think you have a guy stopped for a 1 or 2 yard gain, and while the tackling animation is being engaged, he gets 2, 3, 4 extra yards after he's initially, stopped. And instead of 2nd and 8, it's 2nd and 5. And you need some goddamn ability in order to make a secure wrap-up tackle. That kind of stuff. Zone drop coach adjustment. This was my favorite part of the whole dang thing. And some people that were in the know were kind of like, dude, you're going to love this. Just tune in and watch it. You're going to love it. And I basically had a Twitter orgasm. Now, there's a couple of caveats that I'll get into in a minute, but I'm going to read the entire paragraph. We are introducing a new set of coach adjustments that will allow you, as the defensive player, to customize the depth of your zone drops for underneath zone defenders. These coaching adjustments will give you the ability to change the drop depths of flat, hook, and curl flat zones in increments of 5 yards up to a maximum of 30 yards from the line of scrimmage. When using these adjustments, keep in mind that all match zone logic will be disabled in all zone coverage plays while using the adjustments, including the deep zone players. Let me read that again for a guy that plays a ton of match coverage. When using these adjustments, keep in mind that all match zone logic will be disabled in all zone coverage plays while using this adjustment, including the deep zone players. I can see the logic behind that because, again, man coverage is about relating to routes as they break vertical, so I can see that. Don't love it, but I get it. For a video game, I understand. When facing a no-huddle offense, you can turn off these coaching adjustments by using the reset play option in the pre-play adjustment menu. Now, this is straight out of NCAA football, and hallelujah, round of applause. For you NCAA football guys, you used to be able to adjust whether you wanted your zone depth to play aggressive on default or conservative, where the hook zones and the curl flat zones dropped deeper. And I love that we can customize the drops to a specific yardage depth for protect the stick situations. And stick situations where you're defending the goal line, the first down marker, situational end of game situations, 4th and forever, 3rd and forever. I think that's beautiful. Or if you have an opponent that has a tendency for deep square ins, deep outs, you could adjust that to have your defenders in your spot drop zones drop to those depths. That is terrific. That is great. My only caveat, I have 2 caveats. One, need to see how these defenders are breaking on the ball. Actually, I have 3 caveats. Because none of that matters if they're not relating to the routes and they're not breaking on the ball when the ball is thrown to their area. Second caveat, I want to see how the zone depths are on default. For those of you who are newer to me, maybe this is the first video of mine that you've ever watched, or you've just been following me recently, every year I break down all the coverages in the game. From a football point of view in the YouTube Madden community, I will toot my own horn a little bit. Not a lot of people can match me as far as knowledge of how real-life coverage schemes work and how they're translated in the video game and how to play them in the video game and what's wrong with them in the video game world. I'm pretty much the only one that does it, and I know what I'm talking about. And I mean, unless you're an active coach like good old Coach Mackey, who has a YouTube channel that everyone should be following, and follow him on Twitch as well, and Twitter, who's an active coach, not too many people know more in these YouTube streets. The first thing I'm going to do videos on every single coverage in the game, how the defenders are dropping, how they're relating to routes, in 2x2, in trips, in empty, all of it. Spot drop rules, match coverage rules, man coverage. I go over everything. Check out my channel if you're newer, and you'll be able to see my history. I have sections devoted to all of that. And what is the first thing that I'm always harping on? Defenders who are not gaining enough width and depth in their vertical hooks, hook curl, curl flat, and outside corner cloud flat zones. And safeties not relating to routes that are crossing their face. In my perfect NY Kia 31 world, I want these coach adjustments to be situational tweaks and curveballs that we can put in our toolbox to situationally take away what we want to take away, as opposed to a band-aid to fix the fact that defenders are still not taking the default proper route depths, zone drop depths, and getting the proper width and depth to shrink those windows as much as they can in those spot drop zone coverages. That's my ideal. But if there's still stuff that I can correct, I'd rather have the ability to adjust the zone drop depth than not have defenders relate to the ball. Defenders have to relate to the ball, or that part is useless. So that has to be improved upon. And also, the match coverage bugs need to be ironed out, especially the checks versus trips, bunch, tight sets, and empty. When they first introduced match coverage with Cover 3 Match back in, I think it was Madden 16, which was the first Madden that had them. Cover 3 Match matched against trips. Every year since then, it's gotten a little bit worse against trips and empty sets. Same thing with quarters and palms. A-Dub actually had it pretty darn close to exact. Outside of some stuff and bugs with switch releases and some empty sets and all of that. But for the first iteration, he did a damn admirable job with it. But the issue is the bugs have never been completely ironed out, and they've also watered down some of the trips checks. And I think they do this because there's a fair number of people in the Madden community that just don't understand how match coverage works, and it frustrates them because they're used to having the ability to just one-play bomb stuff where there's no one within 10, 15 yards of a receiver on spot drop coverages. So then when they try those route combinations, they're not working because they're being vertically matched. That kind of mindset has to go away. Correct it and provide teaching tools outside of guys like me who do this for free to teach the players in the community how all this works and how to run route combinations to counter it. Because they are out there. There are route combinations you can run legitimately to defeat match coverage, like anything else in the game. They didn't mention man coverage and they didn't mention pass rush at all, which leads me to believe that more than likely those are going to be the same. Now, for superstar ability and X Factor pass rushers, that's a great thing. They can just take over the entire game. For players that don't have them, again, balancing issues there. A guy without abilities that has, 91, 92 power or finesse move shouldn't be watered down. The pass rush ability should be an enhancer to what he always does, or what he's capable of doing. And I think their solution to that is the pass rush mechanics, which we'll get into later on. The next section, QB and passing improvements. With a more balanced run game comes more reliance on the air attack. Good. To ensure that players will have the tools they need to run more balanced offenses in Madden 21, we've made some significant improvements at throwing the football. There's some good stuff here, but there's also some stuff here. This is a section that has a few things that kind of scare me a little bit. Throwing out of sacks. You guys all know I despise rewarding people for trying to release the ball late while they're in a sack animation. And the first sentence says, all QBs will have the ability to throw the ball while being tackled. I see some kinks that could potentially need to be ironed out with that. The accuracy and power of the pass are dictated largely by physics, a good thing. The further into the passing animation the QB is at the point of contact, the more likely the pass will be accurate. So If I am comprehending that right, if the defender does get there late, but the QB is already, let's say, 3/4 into his throwing motion, the penalty won't be that severe. But anything past that, if he's halfway through, if he's a quarter way through, if he's just starting to wind up, there should be a penalty, or there better be a penalty. Now, in reality, can all QBs throw while they're being hit? Yeah. Does the chance of bad things happening increase as they do that and do that repeatedly? Yes. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. It says also, however, at any point the QB's arms or shoulder are hit during the pass, that too can impact accuracy. Okay, that's better. Throwing out of sacks does carry some risk as well. The earlier in the throwing animation the QB is hit, in combination with the QB's strength rating, the more likely he will be to fumble. Okay, that's better. Okay. Deep pass under pressure, new to Madden 21, are under pressure throwing animations, which will allow QBs to contextually speed up their throwing motions when feeling pressure on deep passes. Throws of 40 or more yards from the spot of the pass to the landing spot. That's important. With the QB windups had no context to them whatsoever in Madden 20. QBs released the ball the same way, whether they were throwing hitch routes, deep post shots, whether they're being pressured. It was all the same throwing animation. So you were a slave to the blitz because you couldn't get the ball out hot. It says these animations are dictated by threat to impact prediction, meaning that the time the pass has been initiated, if the QB thinks he will get hit by an oncoming defender before the release of the pass, he'll use an under pressure animation. And then the QBs throw under pressure rating will modify both the power and accuracy of the pass. I like that. I like that they're trying to figure out ways to use the intangibles ratings, the throw under pressure, the awareness stuff for the QBs into the game more. That's good. I like that. I like how that sounds. I just worry about whenever I hear contextual animation, I just concern about the context being interpreted correctly in a consistent basis, if you know what I mean. QB branch outs. QBs can now quickly branch out of the drop back to throw the ball at any time as soon as the QB has received the snap. If a receiver button input is given, the QB will immediately branch out of his existing behavior and throw the ball to the intended receiver, which also includes branching out of play action fakes. That's the send 7, send 8, Madden 20 blitz meta antidote, and that's great. We got to be able to get the ball hot. I got to be able to break out of if I see a hot read, I got to be able to get it there. Whether it's a quick table route, quick slant, quick hitch, I can't be a slave to the drop back animation and also a slave to the wind up. I got to be able to get that ball out hot. Next up, we've added a new max distance passing power penalty, which will activate when targeting a receiver who is deeper than the QB's max passing distance. The max passing distance for each QB is dictated by his throw power rating. Okay. This penalty also decreases the strength of the pass when throwing deep passes on the run, with more severe penalties to throw power for cross-body throws. My question there is, how much do abilities negate that with dashing deadeye and no-look deadeye and those damn cross-body heaves you can make, 30, 40 yards downfield with those abilities? Do abilities negate these situations and these ratings to the degree that they did in Madden 20? Parity for handoff animations. All handoff animations will be tuned so that all respective handoffs are the same speed, going in either direction. That's the joke MCS belt winner change. I can guarantee you by that being in there, someone was read the riot act and they said, okay, no more of that. Pass interference and illegal contact. In Madden 20, you can bump guys with your user defender all over the field, and I'll be straight up honest, I abuse that as much as anybody else. I take advantage of that. If you ask Brandon in 4th and 1 online CFM, He'll tell you that. I got pissed off that he was able to trade for George Kittle using the Pats. So I was like, you know what? Every time I play him, I'm going to just bump Kittle all over the damn field, and I'm not going to care. So they say that pass interference and illegal contact, we've added support for a more robust management of user-controlled pass interference, and also for the first time, the illegal contact penalty. The goal with this is to prevent users from intentionally obstructing receivers from getting to their routes and or the catch spot, while trying to overlook incidental and unintentional contact. Okay, so I'm curious to see what I can get away with when I try to do that in Madden 21. These penalties will be used in both competitive and simulation game styles and will be called primarily on user-controlled defenders. For franchise players, these penalties can be adjusted by the penalties settings menu. Adjusted how? Does that mean they'll be activated for AI defenders as well? Curious to see more about that. Defensive contain balancing. The thing with contain rushing only works if the tackles can do an effective mush rush, which is they don't rush past the QB as far as the ends are concerned, but the defensive tackles, they don't stay static either. They take a more disciplined rush approach. They don't just bull up field, but they try to keep the QB in front of them so he doesn't have room to step up. And that's something that really hasn't been addressed right in the game for quite some time. But this is more, it sounds like, to do with contain blitzes, which were something that has wreaked havoc on the game for a couple of editions as well. Now, they say with the contains, when utilizing pass rush schemes that free up the contain player from being blocked via an overload side, the player will now rush the QB at a slower speed than if he were not in the contain assignment, as long as the QB is inside the pocket and not using scramble movement. The contained player will be moving at a speed slow enough to read the QB with the intent to keep him in the pocket, but will not break into a full speed rush unless the QB starts to scramble. That's fine. That makes perfect sense. You're not going to take a hard, aggressive upfield rush angle when you're in a contained situation. You're going to feather yourself out more and react to the QB. If the QB breaks off, then obviously you run like a bat out of hell and chase him. But this only works if the QB's ability to step up is also not as comfortable. Otherwise, the QB can just shoot up and just run right by the defensive tackle and be on his way. Unless he gets sucked into an automatic disengage animation and a reach tackle animation. But I digress. But not really. So, yeah, I like how that will be a deterrent to the contain blitz reign of terror. But again, they still haven't really gotten that feel of the mush rush entirely correct. Catching responsiveness. This one is interesting. Players can now dictate the direction they want their catch to take them as they secure the catch via left stick input. For example, when holding up vertical on L stick and using the possession catch, you'll be selecting a possession catch that will fall in the same direction as your stick input, ensuring the receiver won't go to the ground short of the sticks. This increase in control is also critical when throwing underneath routes, as the responsiveness allows receivers to quickly turn up the field after using a rack run after a catch. One obvious case to notice this improvement is when a receiver is nearing the sideline, the user will have the ability to keep him in bounds as he turns up the field rather than running out of bounds. So, okay. So I can choose a direction that he is going to fall when I'm possession catching. Does that mean that I can choose? How many times have you seen a receiver catch the ball with the wrong shoulder? I prefer to be able to place the ball either outside shoulder or inside shoulder. I can see some awkward animations where if you're running to the outside and the ball is thrown behind you, with the possession catch and the stick, reach for that ball and get the proper animation, and vice versa. I can see merit to that. I can see merit to being able to control what direction you're going to be possession catching the ball in. But I want to be able to place that ball there manually and do that. I want to be able to do both. really. I need to see. This is one of those things I need to see a visual. It doesn't really translate to my brain just seeing it in print. So I'm trying to visualize it in my brain, and I'm picturing, some awkward contortions. I need to see that in motion. So I'm going to hold off on how I feel about that until I see how it looks animation-wise. Player personnel packaging. This is awesome. This is an extension of NCAA's audible system where you can audible to any formation within your personnel group. But it also packages formation subs that you can use that it'll honor when you're audibling. So let's say you have two backs. You have one in the slot, one in the backfield, and you have a tight end and two receivers. You can audible to any other formation that has that same personnel group. That is great. Or with two tight ends, let's say you have two tight ends in the slot, or two tight ends out wide, and a slot receiver. You can audible, and you can, you can basically change to any formation group and have access to all those players within those formations. That's phenomenal. And that can make no huddle situations a lot of fun. You have so much more freedom. I'd like to see the defensive side of the ball get that flavor as well. But I think we can survive, given that you can play, nickel sub packages with, big safety, big nickel packages where you have your hybrid safety linebacker type of guy to account for those type of things. I think we'll be fine as far as that's concerned. But it just gives you more freedom and more ways to be creative on offense, which is nice. There's a quick blurb here about bounds for repeated audibles and play flips and pre-play. I'm fine with that. Again, that's that ridiculousness that people do. They flip their formations 2-3 times pre-play, trying to screw up your adjustments and try to screw up the alignment. That's fine. That's going to be penalized by a higher increase in false start penalties. That's okay. I'm okay with that. Don't have any issue with that whatsoever. Player fatigue for out-of-position ball carriers. This is good also. It says, what does it say here? In response, you will now have to strategically manage the workload for ball carriers who are not a primary running back or risk penalties for their ratings for fatigue or overuse after a player who is not a running back by trade, such as a QB, wide receiver, or tight end, has carried the ball as the primary ball carrier on multiple consecutive plays. That player will start to quickly deplete his stamina, especially on tackles and hit sticks. This risk applies to non-RBs and plays like Wildcat Power, Jet Sweep, Touch Pass, and QB Blast. And as they get tired, you'll notice them become less effective on the field, regardless of their role thereafter. That makes sense. Wide receivers and QBs, they're not built for that running back life. The Packers try that with Ty Montgomery, and if they use him too much, what always happens to him? He gets hurt. Look at the toll of Cam Newton's play style and how that's had a toll on his body. That makes sense. I don't see how anyone would have a problem with this. In addition to the run game fits and contains being addressed, that should provide balance here as far as that's concerned. Yeah, you can use them in spot situationally, but a jet sweep, touch pass, and a QB blast should not be the base of your run or pass offense. Simple as that. I mean, I don't see how anyone could possibly have a problem with that. Or trying to give Tyreek Hill 10 carries a game between the tackles. Kicking game tuning. The kicking game is boring. It really is. It's too easy. It's just dull. All kicks feel automatic. Unless you just have a lag meter or a input error. It's too easy to kick. They don't really give us much information as far as what this is. It says kick meter on competitive game style has been tuned to be more skill based, meaning it will be more difficult to get accurate kicks for competitive play, and missing the accuracy window will be slightly more punitive. But how? What's the interface like? How's that going to look mechanically? Kick power wind impact has been tuned on simulation game style so that kickers and punters don't always launch unrealistically deep kicks, while the wind impact on the kicking game will be less significant. Every CFM game, you're always either kicking into or behind a hurricane, so that's good. We tuned ball physics to bring more skid to the ball on kicks bounced on the turf to make the coffin corner kickoff exploit much more difficult to execute. Okay, good. That's fine. No problem with that. Just need to see what the meter and what the interface is going to look like and how it's going to be more challenging. Don't really know much there. Not a lot there as far as that is concerned. Ability improvements. Here is where I'm probably most skeptical. I there was such imbalance to the abilities that I'm very concerned about. First, balancing the unbalanced ones that existed before attempting to add more. I need to see that you're capable of balancing these bad boys. And we also need to see whether or not abilities pretty much make the entire player. In order to have your receiver or tight end catch anything or gain any separation on a particular route, you needed a route specialist ability for that. In order for a scrambling QB or a fast athletic QB to be able to run away from defenders behind the line of scrimmage, he needed an ability for that. That kind of stuff is stupid. Things like human joystick shouldn't even be in the game. You know, run defenders and pass rushers need block shedding and pass rush abilities in order for you to be legit afraid of them. Shouldn't be the case. They should be enhancements. They shouldn't be what makes the player what he is. So what do they say here? Wide receiver route ability balancing. In Madden 20, if you had, post flag elite, if you had streak specialist, you pretty much had a guy who was going to catch everything. But you needed to have that. You had to. Otherwise, he was much harder to use, no matter how good he was. Take abilities off of Julio Jones and watch how quickly he becomes just another guy out there. So yeah. But anyway, they say that wide receivers had a number of abilities granting them catching bonuses on specific types of routes. These abilities, while strong, no kidding, were difficult to use since they required detailed knowledge of your team's playbook or very specific hot routes that might not always be available. They weren't hard to use at all. Just call the play that has the route that you have the ability for and watch magic happen. In Madden 21, we have reworked these abilities to grant their bonuses when the receiver catches the ball in specific areas of the field, regardless of the route they are on. This allows them to accomplish the initial goal of creating receivers that excel at making plays on specific route types while making them much easier to utilize. So I guess that means abilities for receivers that work primarily from the outside versus from the slot. That makes sense. But again, balancing. How does not having receiver in that ability tier play versus having one? And let's say if I have a guy who is an outside specialist receiver, if I happen to have him inside, does he become a liability? Again, going back to the elite guys, a guy like Michael Thomas, he's going to get open whether you line him up inside or outside. But there are guys who are role players. What's going to be the distinction between those type of guys? The coverage abilities. I didn't think the coverage abilities were all that great, at least in MUT. In MUT, guys got worked over left and right because everyone had a receiver ability on the field for their go-to guys. So universal coverage, I saw guys with universal coverage get ripped to shreds. Now in CFM and in online leagues with regular teams, different world. Stephon Gilmore was a pain in my ass in online CFM. Hated playing against him. I don't remember what he had. But again, I think to mirror the receiver route, they're trying to make the corners, I guess, more specialized. Like they say, abilities like man up, zoned out, and universal coverages, and universal coverage were essentially one-stop shops. It was too easy to pick one of these abilities on a defender and just set it and forget it. Ultimately, we didn't like how easy it was to make a defensive powerhouse with very little ability investment. That's more of a MUT thing than a CFM thing. Like in CFM, there's not a lot of those guys to go around. As a solution to this, we have split these abilities up into multiple versions that grant their bonuses across specific areas of the field, mirroring the new wide receiver abilities. Okay, so it's to mirror the, you know, area of the field specialty of the receiver. Now, coverage defenders will need to specialize in defending an area of the field rather than being able to cover the whole gridiron. Does that mean that we can have more scheme-specific type of archetypes, like a Tampa 2 type corner, a cover 3 press bail type corner, a pure man match man coverage corner, off man press man? Okay, that opens up some possibilities. I need to see what those abilities are. Okay, I'll wait and see as far as that one is concerned. Pass lead ability balancing. Pass leading in Madden pretty much has been trashed since Madden 25. And the pass lead abilities, most of them did not really work. So what do they say here? Pass lead abilities from Madden 20 were fairly polarizing. Yes, they were. They allow you to make some impressive plays and throw receivers open in the best of circumstances, but more often than not, they would result in throwing uncatchable passes that were out of reach of your receivers. The Deadeye abilities did that. Those were pretty damn powerful, all of them. Crossbody, no look, roaming, dashing. Even the pocket Deadeye abilities were pretty darn strong. It was the pass lead abilities that sucked. Pass lead elite, the ball would go God knows where. They say in Madden 21 we have removed the increased leading distance of these abilities. Okay. And instead boost the ball's velocity when using the precision passing mechanic on the left stick in combination with bullet passes. Ooh. How will that impact how defenders react to the passes? Is it like an APF 2K8 where you had the charge throw mechanic, you had a rocket arm, you had a laser arm, where it just added more zip? Or is this going to cause situations where the defenders aren't able to break on the ball in order to make something like this work? Okay, this new benefit greatly reduces the ability for defenders to make a play on the ball. That wording scares me when making the correct read and should prove to be a powerful perk for pocket passers. The reason why that scares me is if you try to make that pass lead into a defense that you should not be pass leading it into, that defender damn well better react. I see some overpowered potential with that one. Okay. And we have a ton of additional information to share with you regarding the abilities, blah, 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 yak, 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 yak. They didn't mention the pass rush abilities, so that leads me to believe they're going to be the same. And that's pretty much it. They're going to do a franchise mode and face of the franchise Gridiron Notes deep dive on the 30th, this coming Tuesday, so we'll see how that goes. But that pretty much wraps up the gameplay stuff. I like the focus on balance. From here, it's just a matter of seeing what mechanics work. I mean, look, we know that going into a launch, stuff is going to be buggy. Not everything's going to work perfectly. There's going to be stuff that's going to be underpowered. There's going to be stuff that is overpowered. It's going to be a matter of figuring out which one of these mechanics work, which ones don't, what needs tuning, because it ain't going to roll out all perfect. We know that. So, remains to be seen how the ideas conceptually translate into motion, but I at least have a baseline level to establish an expectation level. I have a base to establish an expectation, and that's important. Now we can go from here and see how it plays out. Anyway, this was kind of lengthy. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Talk to you all later. Peace.